about things of in between. So why don't we officially get started, Stephanie? Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and where my audience can find you.
Yeah, so my name is Stephany. I am an attorney. I'm a writer, a mother to three little boys and one border collie. And yeah, just living my most authentic life right now. But it wasn't always like that. I spent over 17 years within two narcissistic abusive marriages, and I did not know that I was really in these abusive marriages. And my background is in domestic violence. I won the governor's award for my work with survivors of domestic violence. I spent many years at the prosecutor's office working with victims. And yet here I was in these emotionally and psychologically abusive marriages. But when you look at domestic violence, 20 plus years ago, it was focused on physical violence. So what happens when you're in a relationship and you're like, it doesn't seem right? Something feels off, but you don't have a label or a word for it. You don't know what it is because it happens so slowly. It's like when you put a a crab in a pot of water. I don't know, I'm from Oregon. So a crab in a pot of water and you slowly turn up the heat and boil it. You don't know what is happening until all of a sudden it's this full blown like, what? And so that's kind of where I ended up. I was on the floor in my sister's bathroom, just like kind of God, the divine, like, why me? What did I do wrong? From the outside, I'm very successful. But on the inside, it's like, why is my life falling apart? And I couldn't see past all this pain and suffering that had engulfed my life for so many years. I, you know, two abusive, psychologically abusive husbands. A I lost a house in a house fire. I lost a house in a hurricane. I had a baby born with an extremely rare genetic disorder. And then my second husband's ex-wife died of COVID. And all of a sudden I have six little boys under the age of 14. And it's like all this stuff just kept happening. And then I lost my eyesight. And so I'm sitting there and I felt at the time like the divine was saying, Stephany, you are not seeing your life through the right lens. You need to let go of this victim story and become the hero of your story. Because the thing is, when we're in these narcissistic, abusive relationships or toxic relationships of any kind, it's hard to see past being the victim. But until you can let that victim story go, you can't see the lessons. And we'll continue to repeat the patterns until we see the lessons. We'll continue to call these people into our lives until those patterns are broke. And so for me, sitting there on the floor, like, why me? Um, I didn't know I was in these narcissistic abusive marriages. And so what is narcissism, right? What the heck is that? It seems like people are using it a lot. So narcissism is I heard this on a podcast the other day from a doctor. I can't remember her name, but she was explaining narcissism like a cake. There's so many layers to it, and the layers of it, like the ingredients that make up a narcissist, it's that grandiose sense of self-importance, the preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited power or wealth, this excessive need for adoration and admiration. They want to be the center of your attention. They want to be fawned all over. They have a sense of entitlement and a lack of empathy and just a very, very fragile ego. And so, sometimes when people say narcissist, they must be like these really secure people. But really, it's the opposite. They have a fragile ego, very low self esteem. They hate themselves. They have so many layers of protective self, and they don't even know who they are, but they're very destructive. and it's a disordered personality. And so when you are with someone who has this disorder, your life becomes chaos, chaos, trauma, and drama. And it is so hard to get out of this cycle. Um, and so when you look at narcissistic abuse, there is a cycle very similar to the domestic violence cycle. So there's the idealization phase, the devaluation phase, and then the discard. So the idealization phase is, like any relationship, when you first start dating someone, you want to spend all your time with them, right? You want to get to know them. But with a narcissist, it's like 10x. It's to the extreme. You end up dropping your friends. They don't have any friends, so you don't have to worry about that. But you become like their obsession. And at first, it feels nice because who doesn't want to be put on this pedestal and made to be feel good, right? And narcissists, they're charming, they're charismatic, they're beautiful. They can work a room, but when they focus on you, you feel very special. Like, hey, they're giving me their attention. They're making me feel seen and heard.
It's like something you haven't experienced before because that person makes you feel in a lot of ways everything that you ever wanted to feel in your life up until that point, right?
Yes, yes, exactly. And you'll hear them say things like, "You are my soulmate. I prayed for you, and here you are. We are meant to be together." And they make it so easy for you to feel comfortable around them because what they are doing is they mirror you. They mirror your values, they mirror your hobbies, they mirror everything about you to the point where you fall in love with you because they become whomever they need to be with you. They become that person.
Yeah, one thing I'll add
And
to that, Stephanie, as you're saying that is I remember a time because one thing you pointed out, which I think a lot of people fall victim to, is the fact that they don't realize how deep they are in the situation until something hits the fan, right? And you
yes,
mentioned a good point where eons ago, it was abuse was physical, right?
mhm,
For the most part, that was at least what was shown in the public. Now we have a greater focus or maybe an equal focus on emotional abuse, verbal abuse, mental abuse. The ones that are the scars are hidden for the most part because we don't see these forms of damage until we look ourselves in the mirror and we look and we see that, oh my goodness, I realize that I'm not taking care of myself like I used to because this person has beaten me down. I realize I've gained weight because I'm stressed out. I'm always on
mhm.
edge. I'm always on these in these different ways. And for you, when you share that and you highlight what the abuse can do to you, and when as you're mentioning how we get stuck into it, what's maybe a way that someone can identify and say, okay, I am in an abusive relationship. What am I going to do about it at that point?
Yeah, well, when it's the beginning of the relationship, it's very hard to tell that you're with a narcissist. So I tell people like one of the red flags is if it's too good to be true, it might just be too good to be true, right? Caveat emptor. Um, and so and if things progress really quickly, be aware of that. But my two ex-husbands, they were both alcoholics. Well, they hid it. I had no idea that they were drinking like a fifth of vodka. I didn't know. That wasn't a red flag I could have seen. Um, and so, sometimes it's really confusing because what happens is so you have this idealization period, right? Where it's wonderful, it's perfect, it can last for weeks, months, or a year or two, and until they get you hooked. Because the thing is that nobody can lead a double life for so long. The mask has to come off, and it will come off once they got you hooked. Once they got you engaged. Once you've moved in with them and you've quit working because they're supporting you. Once you've given up on a lot of things or left your family and all your friends, and you're just very dependent on them as your friend and your source of companionship and company, and or they get you pregnant, whatever it takes to get you hooked. Then the mask comes off. And when the mask comes off, this is where the devaluation happens. And this is why this phase is called a devaluation. Now, all of a sudden, they're a different person. Everything that they loved and respected and cared about you in the beginning, they no longer do. And this is when the manipulation starts. This is when the gaslighting starts. And for those of you who don't fully understand what gaslighting is, because this is another word that's thrown around a lot, gaslighting is when you manipulate another person into doubting their perceptions, experiences, or understanding of events. It's emotional abuse. In fact, it is a highly calculated form of coercive control. Because again, just like, the cycle of domestic violence, this is all about power and control. So why does a narcissist gaslight you? Well, they gaslight you because it helps them avoid any blame or responsibility. If they can make you doubt your perception of what just happened, then they don't have to take any responsibility for what they just did to you. They will confuse you and twist your words. They will say, they intentionally lie and deceive. And you can have all the evidence you want. My first husband, a covert narcissist, was a tweeter. I'm like, you are cheating. You are having an affair. No, I'm not, as he's living with another woman, right? They live in their delusions. And it doesn't matter how much evidence you have, they will not believe it. And they will deny and deny and deny until they make you question your reality. So some common gaslighting phrases are, you are too sensitive. Or you can't, I'm just speaking my truth. You need to stop being so sensitive so you can hear my truth out. Or you can't take a joke. I'm just being sarcastic. That's not how it happened. You're twisting the words. Or one of my ex-husband's favorites was, you look at the watch and be like, oh yeah, this is why you're acting like a bitch. It's the moon cycle's coming. They turn everything around to where they're the victim and you are just in this utter confusion of what just happened. And so all of that is called cognitive dissonance, where you start to question your reality. And they keep you in this fog and keep you confused because then they can control you. And it is about controlling. And so then what happens, though, is that there's intermittent reinforcement of positive. They're not always horrible. They know they can't be horrible 100% of the time, or no one would ever be with them. So they give you rewards. So they'll go disappear for 3 days, or go pout, or go have a tantrum. They're very much the toddlers. I have a toddler. I know what it's like. They'll go and pout, and while they're off pouting, they won't respond to you. And here you are. What did I